People who cannot afford bail might languish in jail for weeks, months, or even years while they're waiting for trial. They can lose their jobs, their homes, their medical coverage, access to medical care or medication, or even custody of their children. I, too, want to keep violent offenders off the street. Everyone in this chamber wants to keep violent offenders off the street, but this bill will not do that. H.R. 6220 will punish Americans before a conviction is even determined. A charge is not a conviction, meaning there is no determination of guilt. Yet this bill will keep charged Americans jobless. It will keep charged Americans homeless. It will keep charged Americans in poverty. And it has the potential to leave the children of charged, not convicted Americans parentless. I oppose this legislation, and I urge my colleagues to do the same. And I yield the balance of my time.
On Capitol Hill today, a deeply emotional and sharply critical speech cut through a tense committee debate as Congresswoman Lucy McBath of Georgia spoke out against the so-called Keeping Violent Offenders Off Our Streets Act. Her remarks went far beyond a simple yes or no vote, laying bare a broader argument about justice, poverty, and how the criminal legal system treats people who have not been convicted of any crime. If you want coverage that explains not just what lawmakers say, but what it means for real people, be sure to subscribe so you do not miss what comes next.
Request.
Gentlelady is recognized for unanimous consent.
This is from CNN Politics. DHS officials privately expressed shock at department's immediate response to Minneapolis shooting.
Without objection, that be entered in the record. Mr. Cohen, if I could, Ms. McBath had asked for recognition, very first one, and I started going down, so I'll go to her and then I'll come to you, Steve. So, gentlelady from Georgia is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wish to just speak on this bill today in my opposition to it. But really, I hope that the world is appalled at this administration's blatant and egregious culture of sadistic violence towards the American people. And today we're talking about keeping violent offenders off of our street. I hope that the world isn't looking at America thinking that our law enforcement and ICE agents themselves are not violent offenders. But I do digress. I want to talk about the bill as our colleague from New Jersey has expressed. Let's talk about the bill. As Americans struggle to afford groceries, fill their gas tanks, save their family farms, or find jobs that pay a livable wage, this committee is focusing on weaponizing the federal government against bail funds and strengthening the for-profit bail bond industry. H.R. 6260 is yet another example of misguided, unnecessary federal meddling into policies that should be left to the states by the so-called party of states' rights that does nothing to promote public safety. And while this bill is aimed at discouraging or even destroying bail funds, any organization that posts monetary bail, criminal bonds, or federal immigration bail bonds would be subject to the federal insurance fraud statute. That's not just bail funds that would be subject to criminal liability. That's churches, faith groups, nonprofits, and any other community organizations that pool financial resources to protect people from a system that punishes poverty, destabilizes families, and oftentimes coerces guilty pleas. Mr. Chairman, sometimes the most effective tools for justice are local, nimble, and born from the communities that they serve. H.R. 6260 is aimed directly at those very tools, which often serve as a lifeline for thousands of low-income Americans, leaving only a potential windfall for the for-profit commercial bail industry. Proponents of this bill have previously claimed that bail funds operate in the shadows and that their donations come with little to no scrutiny. That is simply untrue. For example, the Bail Project, a 501c3 organization, is subject to regular monitoring and oversight by the IRS. Adding additional nonsensical layers of bureaucracy will not make our community safer, but it will make it harder for organizations like the Bail Project to help people in need. And let's be real, most of them are people of low income, poor people. There are nearly 500,000 people across the country in pretrial detention, meaning they're sitting in jail, who have not been convicted of a crime because they cannot afford to pay for their freedom. Without the help of organizations willing to help by providing free bail assistance, whether designated as a bail fund, church, or other nonprofit, people who cannot afford bail might languish in jail for weeks, months, or even years while they're waiting for trial. They can lose their jobs, their homes, their medical coverage, access to medical care or medication, or even custody of their children. I, too, want to keep violent offenders off the street. Everyone in this chamber wants to keep violent offenders off the street, but this bill will not do that. H.R. 6220 will punish Americans before a conviction is even determined. A charge is not a conviction, meaning there is no determination of guilt. Yet this bill will keep charged Americans jobless. It will keep charged Americans homeless. It will keep charged Americans in poverty. And it has the potential to leave the children of charged, not convicted Americans parentless. I oppose this legislation, and I urge my colleagues to do the same. And I yield the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Florida. Ms. Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'll begin by acknowledging and appreciating our colleague.
McBath opened with a statement that set the tone immediately, saying she hoped the world was watching and taking note of what she described as a disturbing culture of violence under the current administration. While the bill's title suggests a focus on public safety, McBath questioned whether the conversation had been turned upside down, asking whether Americans might instead be seeing law enforcement and immigration agents themselves becoming sources of harm. She then deliberately shifted back to the legislation at hand, signaling that her opposition was grounded not just in rhetoric, but in policy substance. She described the bill, known as H.R. 6260, as unnecessary federal interference in an area traditionally left to the states. This criticism was especially pointed because it was coming in a committee led by lawmakers who often described themselves as champions of states' rights. According to McBath, the bill does nothing to improve public safety and instead uses federal power to crack down on community-based efforts to help people who cannot afford bail. McBath explained that while the bill is framed as a response to bail funds, its reach would be far broader. Any organization that helps post monetary bail, including criminal or federal immigration bonds, could be exposed to federal insurance fraud charges. That does not just include formal bail funds. It could include churches, faith-based organizations, nonprofits, and other community groups that pool resources to help people avoid sitting in jail simply because they are poor. McBath reminded the committee that some of the most effective tools for justice are local and rooted in the communities they serve. Bail funds and similar organizations, she argued, are often lifelines for low-income Americans. By targeting them, this bill would effectively funnel more money and power toward the commercial bail industry, creating a windfall for private companies while stripping communities of support systems. Supporters of the bill have claimed that bail funds operate in secrecy, with little oversight. McBath directly challenged that assertion. She cited the Bail Project, a nonprofit organization structured as a 501c3, which is already subject to regular monitoring by the Internal Revenue Service. Adding new layers of federal bureaucracy, she said, would not make communities safer, but it would make it harder for these groups to do their work. If you want continued coverage that digs into claims made on Capitol Hill and checks them against reality, be sure to subscribe. McBath then placed the issue in a national context. Nearly 500,000 people in the United States are currently in pretrial detention. These individuals have not been convicted of a crime. They are sitting in jail simply because they cannot afford bail. Without help from bail funds, churches, or nonprofits, many of these people remain incarcerated for weeks, months, or even years while awaiting trial. The consequences, McBath explained, ripple far beyond jail walls. People can lose their jobs, their housing, their health insurance, and access to medical care. Parents can lose custody of their children. Entire families can be pushed deeper into poverty, all before a court has ever determined guilt or innocence. She was careful to make one point absolutely clear. Everyone in that chamber wants to keep violent offenders off the streets. The disagreement is over whether this bill actually accomplishes that goal. She reminded the committee of a fundamental principle of the justice system. A charge is not a conviction. Yet under this bill, charged individuals could be left jobless, homeless, and trapped in poverty, with their children suffering the consequences. That, McBath argued, is not public safety. It is collective punishment. As she concluded, McBath urged her colleagues to oppose the legislation, framing the vote as a test of whether Congress is willing to protect constitutional rights and the presumption of innocence, or whether it will continue to criminalize poverty under the banner of law and order. This debate highlights a larger question facing lawmakers and the public alike: whether justice in America will be determined by risk and fairness or by who can afford to pay. If you want more reporting that explains these issues clearly and connects the dots, make sure you subscribe to the channel.